If two people are truly meant for each other, there is always a pattern that repeats itself. No matter how different their backgrounds are or how unlikely their meeting seems. It shows up in a way that most people don't recognize at first, but it never really fails. A lot of people imagine destiny as something soft, comforting, and instantly right. They think it arrives like peace from day one, like two lives aligning perfectly, where everything suddenly feels easy and familiar. In their mind, it looks like two people meeting, exchanging a smile, and immediately knowing they have found the one. But real destiny doesn't usually arrive like that. Real destiny tends to feel unsettling at first. It doesn't come in to calm your life. It comes in to disturb it. It shakes things, challenges your direction, and forces movement where things were previously still. Instead of instantly bringing people together, it often creates space between them first. Distance shows up. Timing feels off. Circumstances don't align. And instead of smooth connection, there is confusion, resistance, and emotional intensity. When two people are genuinely meant for each other, life doesn't rush them into union. It delays it. It separates them. It pulls them into situations that force them to grow individually before they can ever share a stable bond together. This separation isn't random or meaningless. It's part of a deeper process that prepares both people for something they are not yet ready to handle. Because before any real union can happen, the illusion has to break. Destiny, in its truest form, doesn't support fantasy. It disrupts it. It exposes weaknesses, emotional patterns, unhealed wounds, and false beliefs about love. It pushes both individuals to confront parts of themselves they have been avoiding for a long time. And that is why these connections often feel intense from the very beginning, even when they don't feel peaceful. The first sign of something deep is rarely comfort. It is recognition. You meet someone, and something inside reacts before your mind can explain it. It doesn't always feel safe or stable. In fact, it can feel confusing or overwhelming. You may not fully trust them. You may not fully understand what is happening, but there is a strange sense of being seen in a way that feels almost uncomfortable. It is as if they can notice parts of you that you normally hide, even from yourself. And this is where most people misunderstand the experience. They expect love to feel soothing, predictable, and emotionally secure from the start. But destined connections often do the opposite in the beginning. They stir things up. They trigger emotional awareness. They reflect your inner world back to you in a way that is impossible to ignore. They don't just see the version of you that you present to others. They seem to touch deeper layers of your personality, your fears, your emotional wounds, your insecurities, and the parts of you that still need healing. And because of that, the connection can feel overwhelming rather than relaxing. This is also why these kinds of bonds are rarely smooth at the beginning. They are not built on immediate comfort. They are built on emotional awakening. And awakening is not always gentle. This is why separation so often happens early. If two people are meant to be together in a deeper sense, life often places them apart first. One may not be emotionally ready. One may still be carrying past pain. One may not understand their own value yet. One may love from fear instead of stability. Sometimes both individuals are still incomplete in their emotional development, even if their intentions are genuine. And when two unfinished people come together too soon, the connection can become destructive instead of meaningful. So instead of allowing that, life creates distance. It delays the meeting. It interrupts the timing. It forces growth in separate directions. And that separation hurts, but it is not punishment. It is protection and preparation at the same time. Because when destined people are pulled apart, the emotional experience is not like ordinary heartbreak. It doesn't just feel like sadness. It feels disorienting, like something inside your life lost its direction. It's not only that you miss the person, you feel like you lost a part of your inner stability. That happens because these connections don't just interact with your emotions, they interact with your growth. They are not only about attachment, they are about transformation. When such a person leaves your life, it starts an inner process that you don't always notice immediately. You begin to reflect more. You start becoming aware of patterns you used to ignore. You begin to see your fear of abandonment, your need for validation, your tendency to overgive in relationships, and your difficulty in setting emotional boundaries. These realizations can be uncomfortable, but they are deeply important. The pain is not there to destroy you. It is there to awaken awareness in you. Even when there is no contact anymore, even when everything externally has stopped, something internally keeps shifting. Slowly, you begin to change. Your emotional responses evolve. Your standards start to rise. Things you once accepted no longer feel acceptable. Situations you used to tolerate begin to feel draining instead of normal. Your focus starts shifting from surface-level attention to something deeper. You stop chasing temporary reassurance and start wanting real emotional presence. You stop valuing intensity without stability and start valuing consistency, honesty, and mutual effort. And often, you don't even realize that this transformation started with that one connection. That person acted like a trigger, not in a destructive sense, but in a developmental one. They activated something inside you that was already waiting to grow. And once that process begins, it doesn't stop just because they are gone. Instead of creating obsession, these connections create reflection. You don't just keep thinking about them endlessly, you start thinking about yourself, about your behavior, about your choices, about your emotional patterns. You begin asking deeper questions without even realizing it. Why do I attach this way? Why do I fear closeness? Why do I accept less than I deserve? Why do I keep repeating the same emotional cycles? And slowly, those questions reshape you from within. Even if the connection is no longer active in your life, its impact continues. It changes the way you understand relationships. It changes the way you see your own worth. It changes what you are willing to accept and what you are no longer available for. Over time, you start to notice a shift. You no longer chase people who cannot meet you emotionally. You stop ignoring the signs that something is not right just to feel chosen. You become more drawn to peace, emotional honesty, and balanced effort. And the most important change is this. You start valuing yourself in a way you didn't before. That is how these connections leave their mark. Not through constant presence, but through deep transformation. And even though it may not feel like it in the moment, this is often what destined connection really looks like at its core. And that is how you recognize that a connection truly mattered. Destined love is never loud or forceful. It does not always stay in your life in a permanent way. Sometimes it arrives, reshapes you from within, and then steps away. And sometimes it leaves precisely so you can become the version of yourself capable of holding real love without losing yourself in it. Whether that person returns or not is not always the real point. The deeper purpose is what changed inside you. The awakening, the redirection, the shift toward a more conscious, more self-aware way of living and loving. When two people are truly meant for each other, their story rarely follows a straight or simple path. Instead, it moves through distance, confusion, emotional intensity, and deep inner transformation. Growth always seems to come before union, and this is the pattern that repeats again and again, the part most people only understand in hindsight. You don't always think about them during calm or ordinary moments. You think about them when something is shifting inside you, when you are quietly becoming more aware of yourself, when life is still on the outside but loud within your mind, when emotions surface without warning and something in you suddenly clicks into understanding. You don't think of them because you are simply lonely or seeking attention. It is not just emotional dependence or validation. It feels deeper than that. It feels like something within you recognizes unfinished meaning, as if the experience itself still has something to reveal. It is not obsession. It is not weakness. It is not unhealthy attachment in the way people often label it. It is integration. Your inner world trying to process, organize, and fully absorb what the experience awakened in you. Trying to understand where it belongs in your life story and who it is shaping you into. A connection like this doesn't fade just because time passes. It continues to appear in subtle ways. It shows up in your growth. It shows up in your healing. It shows up when you outgrow old versions of yourself and begin to see life differently. Because the connection was never only about the person, it was about transformation. And many people never understand why it cannot simply be replaced. So they try. They meet new people. They enter new relationships. They stay busy. They distract themselves. They convince themselves that moving on means forgetting. Sometimes on the surface it works. Life looks normal again. There is laughter, routine, and interaction. But deep down, something feels slightly unfinished. Not because the new person is lacking, and not because the new relationship has no value, but because it does not activate the same depth within you. A destined connection doesn't compete with new experiences. It exists on a different emotional and psychological level. It is not built on attraction alone, or comfort, or timing. It is built on evolution, on becoming more aware of who you are. And often, that growth begins while the two people are apart. Distance is not rejection. It is development space. During separation, life shapes both individuals in different ways, often through discomfort and reflection. One person learns boundaries. They learn to say no without guilt. They learn that love should not cost their self-respect. They learn that overgiving is not proof of care, but often a loss of balance. They learn that choosing themselves is not selfish, it is necessary. The other person learns accountability. They begin to understand that emotional distance can cause real impact, that silence is not neutral, that actions carry weight even when intentions are unclear, that love without responsibility is incomplete. One person learns self-respect and stops confusing uncertainty with love. They stop accepting inconsistency as something they must endure. They begin to value clarity and emotional stability. The other learns emotional courage. They stop avoiding feelings. They stop running from vulnerability. They learn to face what they once escaped. One learns to stop chasing, realizing that love cannot be forced. The other learns to stop running, realizing that distance does not erase emotional truth. It only delays growth. Both are changing, even if neither can fully see it yet. And that is intentional. Because if everything was understood too early, the transformation would stop. Before any reunion can happen, illusions must fall. Life slowly removes false beliefs, even when it feels painful. Beliefs like, love should never hurt. Beliefs like, the right person will never leave. Beliefs like, suffering proves devotion. Beliefs like, another person can complete what is missing within you. These ideas feel comforting at first, but they quietly create emotional dependence and unrealistic expectations. So life dismantles them through distance, silence, and emotional challenge. In that process, you begin to see yourself more honestly. You recognize where you abandoned your own needs. You understand where you ignored your inner voice just to keep a connection alive. You realize that love is not meant to rescue you. It is not meant to replace self-healing. It begins from wholeness, not emptiness. And then something subtle begins to happen. You stop needing them in the same way. You stop checking for signs. You stop waiting for a message to define your emotional state. You stop expecting closure from the outside world. And surprisingly, this does not feel painful. It feels lighter, more peaceful. This is where real movement begins again, not because you forced it, but because you released attachment to a specific outcome. Because real love is not dependence, it is choice. When two people can exist fully on their own, love becomes something they enter freely, not something they use to survive. If reunion ever happens after that point, it feels different. Not intense in a chaotic way, but calm, familiar in a grounded way. There is less fear, less overthinking, less emotional noise. You are no longer trying to protect yourself or prove anything. What remains is honesty, natural, unforced honesty, clear communication, respect for boundaries, emotional awareness, no games, no confusion, no testing, just recognition with maturity behind it. But even then, sometimes the people do not come back together. And this is where acceptance becomes essential. Because it does not mean the connection was meaningless. It simply means its purpose was not permanence. Some connections are not meant to stay. They are meant to transform you, break old emotional cycles, and awaken something that changes how you see yourself and love entirely. They come into your life not to complete your story, but to change its direction. These are the kinds of relationships that bring to light the patterns you didn't even realize you had been living with since long before you had the awareness to question them. They reveal where love was mistaken for sacrifice, where attachment was confused with safety, and where silence was wrongly interpreted as peace. These connections don't just touch your life lightly. They expose what you've been carrying that was never truly yours in the first place. They pull buried emotions to the surface so they can finally be understood, processed, and healed instead of silently repeated in different forms. Other connections come into your life to teach you self-love, especially in the places where you have been neglecting yourself for too long. Through them, you begin to see how you allow others to treat you. You notice where you shrink yourself, where you tolerate less than you deserve, and where you abandon your own needs just to maintain closeness with someone. And slowly, a painful truth becomes clear. Love was never meant to cost you your dignity, your voice, or your sense of self. These lessons are not easy, but they are necessary. Without them, you would likely continue overgiving, overinvesting, and expecting very little in return, repeating cycles that quietly drain you over time. Some destined connections awaken emotional depth inside you that you may have suppressed for years. They make you feel things you had long numbed yourself to. They reconnect you with your capacity to care deeply, to be vulnerable, and to experience real emotional intimacy again. Even if they leave you more open than before. Other connections completely redirect your life path. Meeting them changes your priorities, your decisions, your standards, and even the direction you move in life. They don't stay forever because their role was never permanence. Their role was activation and preparation. And that does not make them meaningless. It makes them significant in a different way. Some experiences are sacred not because they last, but because of what they awaken within you. Many people struggle with this idea because destiny often feels harsh before it ever feels kind. It seems to take before it gives. It removes before it restores. But destiny is not designed to protect comfort. Comfort often keeps people stuck in patterns that quietly harm them. Destiny, instead, protects potential. Recognize this if you've ever felt that immediate, unexplainable recognition with someone, that deep inner sense that something about them feels familiar in a way you cannot logically explain. These connections will let your heart break before they allow your soul to disappear slowly in the wrong place. They will remove people from your life before you lose yourself trying to hold on to them. And in the moment, it feels unbearable. You replay everything. You question your worth. You wonder what you did wrong. You try to find meaning in every detail, as if understanding it perfectly could change the outcome. But time slowly reveals what emotion could not explain at the time. With distance, you begin to see that staying would have kept you locked inside an older version of yourself. You begin to understand that the separation wasn't just loss, it was movement. It forced you into growth you were resisting. There is a truth that repeats itself in almost every destined connection. When two people are meant to be together in a deeper sense, they are often required to grow separately first. They are separated so illusions can dissolve, so false ideas about love, about each other, and about themselves can break down. They are pushed to confront their emotional wounds, their fears, their patterns, and the ways they avoid responsibility for their own healing. This is not punishment, it is preparation. It is not a consequence for being imperfect or for loving incorrectly. It is a pause created by life itself, a space where both individuals are reshaped into more grounded, more conscious versions of who they are meant to become. During this time, each person is refined through experience, often through discomfort, into something more stable, more self-aware, and more emotionally honest. In this process, you learn things that cannot be rushed. You learn boundaries, not as walls to shut people out, but as healthy structures that protect your peace and reflect your worth. You learn self-respect that no longer depends on external validation, but instead comes from a quiet, internal knowing of your own value. You learn how to love deeply without losing yourself in the process. You learn that being chosen by someone else means very little if you have not first chosen yourself. Wholeness cannot be outsourced. It has to be built from within. Only after this inner transformation begins does life start to reveal what comes next. Sometimes that path leads back to reunion, where two people meet again with clearer minds, softer egos, and stronger emotional foundations. And sometimes it leads in a completely different direction, guiding each person toward something more aligned with who they have become. Either way, no one remains the same. Something fundamental shifts, subtle at first, but undeniable over time. The person you were at the beginning of that experience no longer fully exists in the same form. If you are reading this and thinking of someone, let this settle quietly within you. You don't need to chase. You don't need to force. You don't need to prove anything. What is truly meant for you will never demand that you abandon yourself. It will not require you to shrink, to suffer in silence, or to live in constant uncertainty. True alignment feels grounded. It feels honest. It feels steady, even if it is simple. It does not make you question your worth. It does not require you to ignore your intuition. It does not ask you to become less of yourself in order to be loved. It asks only for growth, honesty, and courage, the kind that comes from facing yourself fully, even when it is uncomfortable. And if that person never returns, it is not failure. It is completion. That connection was never meant to be measured only by duration or presence. It was meant to teach, to reshape, and to guide you toward something deeper within yourself. Destined connections are not about possession, certainty, or guarantees. They are about transformation. They arrive when something inside you is ready to evolve, or when life decides you need to be prepared for that evolution. They disrupt comfort so you can see clearly. They challenge your beliefs so healthier ones can replace them. And even when they leave pain behind, they also leave clarity, awareness, and understanding. Nothing is wasted. Not the silence, not the confusion, not the longing, not the heartbreak. What feels like loss often turns out to be redirection. What feels like rejection often becomes protection. And what feels like an ending is often the beginning of a deeper relationship with yourself. Destiny does not rush. It does not explain itself early. And it does not adjust to impatience. It works quietly, often in ways you only understand much later, when you finally see how every moment, especially the painful ones, was guiding you all along.